But actually, for everyone's benefit, let's all introduce ourselves and then we kick off. So, slightly bold and start. So Sean, based in London, part of the business development and partnership team with SineSpace. Steve, do you want to go next?
Sure thing. So my name's Steve Isaacs, and yeah, Noah and I go way back, and I think Sean, you and I probably had a call a while ago.
Yeah.
So I teach game design and development at William Allen Middle School in New Jersey, and our kids are part of a research study on VR in the classroom, and they're all here. My sixth period class is here, watching very attentively and excited to hear from you.
Okay. Noah?
Yeah, hi. I'm a digital literacy and English teacher. I switched. Steve knows me as a science teacher. And I'm here to learn. I'm actually developing a role-playing game in real life. It's called The Jungle, and I want to give it a digital perspective so that the kids would come to the computer room and get into the digital world and then continue in class. So this is, I tried the second life of it, and now I'm working with an open sim company in Israel. So
Fabulous. And Rowan, last but not least, do you want to tell us about
Hi. Yeah. So my name's Rowan, one of the founders of Sinewave, which has spent the last 7 years building the SineSpace platform. We actually were founding developers of OpenSim before that, so we're very familiar with OpenSim. And before that, we were the biggest retailers in Second Life, so also know Second Life quite well. Yes, abandoned those platforms about 7 years ago to build our own and brought it to public beta just last year.
And Steve and Noah, how do you know each other? Is that just through Victor on the sort of education network?
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve, you go.
Sure. So, I mean, Noah and I are both very active in the Minecraft education sphere. And
Yes.
I think Noah, way back when, kind of started to connect with that community. And she and I worked together a little through Skype and all sorts of neat things. And now we just travel in the same professional learning network circles, all game-based learning kind of stuff.
Okay.
Right.
And Steve, no doubt, your time is pressing too, but Steve, because you've got a load of students, let's just think about your time frame here. How long do you have this?
I have until, about a half hour.
Okay. Well, we better rock on then.
Rock on.
Yeah, and Steve's recording this, just for everybody to know.
Yes, I'm recording it.
Rowan.
Fine. Okay. So yesterday we spoke to some of your colleagues and we talked about the potential for our platform to play a role in education, particularly in the K through 12 space. And then I think that we identified some value that we think the platform has, and we identified some problems that need to be overcome before we can really achieve what our ambitions might be. So if you like, what I can do is talk through some of those. I won't spend too long on the platform, but I'll describe the platform very briefly and then get as quickly as I can to the salient points that relate to the K through 12 education market. And then I can share my screen, show, I was going to show in particular, if you think it's a good thing to show, I was going to show a demo region that is actually part of something we're doing in the sort of adult education space, but it has some components in it and some examples in it that I think are relevant. And then I was going to show the sort of the behind the scenes of how it was built and the tools within the platform that we used to create it. If you think that sounds like a useful approach.
Sounds great.
Yep. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
excellent.
Okay, so I'll share my screen while I'm talking, just so you can see a few slides. And so share screens, start. And okay, so let's start at the beginning. So okay, so SineSpace. So what is it? I mean, we should probably expect you guys to know all this, but obviously it's multi-user, it's dimensional. It's so we use terms like multi-purpose and comprehensive. What we're really trying to say there is the platform that we have spent the last 7 years building is designed to be the virtual world platform rather than a virtual world platform, and that's because our ambition is to deliver a range of tools that will allow anybody to build any use case of virtual world. And so our existing customers range from the US Department of Defense building large training simulations on private grids to private individuals creating, nightclubs for tiny niche music industry, communities, and everything on the spectrum you can imagine in between those two. Universities, education publishers, so the full gamut of the entire enterprise, consumer, entertainment, and education markets. Within education, there are a number of sort of critical features, I suppose, that we were aware of, were important for us to consider when we were involved deeply with OpenSim, and where we've tried to learn the lessons and address those issues. So what I'll do is I'll talk first about the problems that we've solved, or think we've solved, and then I'll come on to the problems that we haven't yet solved. So the problems that we've solved, particularly based into K through 12, are the platform that we have built, this 3D virtual world platform, has two major sort of critical features, three actually, I suppose. One, it white labels really easy, so it's really easy and cost effective for us to hand out essentially isolated grids that are still hosted by us, so nobody has to go through the bother of setting up servers or anything, but there's a custom viewer that that is integrated with the authentication of that institution, and only its users go in to only its regions. Or indeed, there's also the potential to federate with other institutions that it considers to be, to meet the same sort of safety standards. So there's no sort of crossover between sort of public entertainment grids with adults. It's easy to isolate the users into an educational space. And we also, for your reference, have manual review on all content that's uploaded. And all of that can also be delivered through WebGL, through the browser without any HTML, without any plugins, which means that you don't even need to go to the lengths of installing a viewer behind the firewall in order to let people in. So those are kind of like structural things that we observed were sort of minimum requirements that had to be delivered before it was going to be possible to really distribute anything meaningful into the education space. The other thing that I'll touch on that space, which actually, given your experience with Minecraft, I'll be interested to hear your feedback on, is the platform also comes with a whole array of what we think of as being sort of control mechanisms. Now, if your sixth grade class there listening, they might be absolutely appalled by what I'm going to describe now. Because this probably sounds like it takes all the fun out of it, but I'll articulate it for the teacher's benefit anyway. And so, in our understanding from people who've been using things like World of Warcraft and Minecraft for educational purposes, is because they're not purpose-built for that. There are limitations and issues in terms of, how do you get everybody to sit down? How do you get everybody to focus on what you want them to focus on? How do you stop them from building at certain times? And essentially, how do you sort of control the flow of the lesson? And as somebody who spent almost every minute of every lesson misbehaving when I was at school, I can say that I understand fully just how difficult it is for teachers to do that. And so this platform is designed to provide teachers with a whole load of sort of control mechanisms, buttons they can push, whereby, for instance, everybody has to sit down in their seats, or you push another button and everybody looks at what the teacher's camera is looking at, or you push another button and the teacher can hop onto an individual pupil's camera and see what the pupil is looking at through their eyes. So those are kind of mechanisms that, generally speaking, in things like Second Life and OpenSim, because they're designed for a much more sort of unstructured peer-to-peer environment where you wouldn't naturally, where those kind of control mechanisms might be considered to be beyond the boundaries of ordinary social engagement. You wouldn't normally expect to be able to force people to sit down in a normal social environment. So those systems don't exist, and similarly they don't exist in World of Minecraft. But they're all available, including some that are only available on the white label grid that we wouldn't make available on the public grid because it would be too much of a position. Things like being able to turn everybody's mics off and control audio channels and things like that. So all of those control mechanisms sort of almost on a gear stick basis are available to the teacher. Okay, so that's the stuff that's there, which is kind of architectural. Then on top of that, you've got hundreds of components creating virtual world content. I will show some of that in a minute. I'm going to show our Quest system, which is a storyboard tool, a storytelling tool that allows you to sort of progress through narrative structures, whether they're linear or bifurcating, and that allows you to move an audience from sort of receiving information through cutscenes to action steps, which might be, part of a lesson plan. So I'm going to show some of that, which is some of the actual components and scripting. But before I do, because I think it'll give some context to those tools, what I'm going to highlight now is what I think is the main sort of impediment to us rolling the platform out within schools on a large scale basis, and that is that although what we've built is absolutely huge and has vast sort of structural capabilities in terms of what you do, it's also a big old unit. There are an awful lot of buttons, there are an awful lot of sliders, and so I can show some examples. Obviously, you might be aware this is all built as a massive layer of infrastructure on top of Unity. So basically what people do directly with our toolkit is they install Unity, which is the dominant game industry game engine in the market, and then they import what we call the editor pack, our editor pack, into it, and that provides them with hundreds and hundreds of components. Now most of those components are things that you use in the scene. So you can see here, for instance, in this little classroom environment, I've got a seat component. If I can just highlight the thing, there we go. So you can see this seat component here. This one's a relatively easy item to use. I'll just show you the kind of functionalities that you've got on a seat component like this. So you can see here I've got an animation. So that's when you sit down, you do that animation. On this one, it just happens to be a static pose, but obviously it could be a fully animated animation. So again, that seat component, where do I go here? I'll sit on this one. Could be any kind of, it could be running, it could be anything where you're binding the user to a particular location and playing an animation on them. You've got options if you want to for different animations for male and female avatars. You've got a slot here called NPC. That means if you've got a non-player character in the scene, you can drag it into there and then it will basically occupy that seat. So an NPC, a non-player character, is another component. So it's like Lego bricks in the platform. NPC is another component. I search the project for it, which is like my inventory for an NPC. I drag it out. Now I've got that NPC in the scene, and I can go back to my sit animation and I can drag that NPC into here, and now that will be sitting there when I upload this and publish it. And the NPC, you will see, appears when you're in the build mode as just a grey box with a big square nose, saying what direction it's pointing in. There's actually a field here for its outfit ID, and if you're in the virtual world, and I'll go in there now and show you, you can then every time you create an app for your own avatar, you get an ID. So that gives you some examples of the basic Lego bricks. I'm going to show a couple of other things. I'm going to show this Quest tool. Actually, first what I'll do is let's go in world and show you the end result, and then I'll come back and show you how it's built. So the key message, I suppose, that we're wrestling with, and that actually we approached. Is it Mitch, Sean, who we were talking to yesterday? Was it Mitchell?
Yes, sorry, it's Mitch. I had police cars going by, so I might have Mitch.
That's right. So yes, yeah. So the key thing we were talking to him about was how do we get from this, which is a vast and extensive array of Lego bricks for building virtual environments with, from here to a suite of applications that a teacher who isn't going to get their arms buried into Unity would be able to pick up and modify virtual world lesson plans for different subject matters, whether that's languages or history or STEM sciences or whatever. So how do we get teams of combinations of developers who understand Unity and understand our platform on the one hand, and educators, instructional designers, teachers on the other hand, coming together to understand what the potential of this platform is, and then actually start building content, applications that can be used by wider audiences of teachers. So that's the work we have to do next. We've actually already got it happening in quite a mature way in the university sector. So we've got large educational publishers and education e-learning developers in the higher education space, building complex, really extraordinary multi-region learning modules for, for biology, where people fly through cell structures and then go into a virtual laboratory and do virtual experiments. And, it doesn't matter if they mix the wrong chemicals and blow the laboratory up because it's a virtual laboratory. So those kind of things are starting to happen in the higher education space over the last few months. And sort of our goal is to work out how do we get that happening in the K through 12 space. So I'm just going to jump in world now. So here you'll see I'm in the browser. This is just a Chrome browser. I'm going to jump in world, enter male avatar. So just single click to log in, and it's going to load a scene. And this scene is actually a demo scene we've put together. And this is actually, again, focused on education, but another bit of the education space where it's looking at educating people within companies. So sort of institutional learning. So for instance, one of the little demos that we have in here is on an oil rig, because if you imagine the crew of an oil rig before they go out to work on the oil rig for the first time, if they can spend time together as a team doing exercises on the oil rig in a virtual space before they go to the real one, then when they get to the real one, they know their way around, and they're much more effective at doing their jobs because they've already spent hours and hours running around the environment, and when they get there, it's like they already know it. So this is a demo. The reason I'm showing it to you is because I'm going to do a couple of very quick little quests in here, so you've seen what the results of that quest storytelling system are, and then I'm going to show you the back end and show you how they were built, because that again speaks to sort of the tools that we've got and how much further we need to go to get them productized and editorialized in a way that can be picked up by teachers and local education authorities and things like that. So here I am. I'm in. You can see I'm a kind of pretty cool looking guy with a pair of sunglasses and a mean haircut. And I obviously standard virtual world environment. I'm in a multiplayer environment. I think I'm probably in here on my own at the moment, but I can walk around and so on and so forth. Haven't even registered an account yet. But the first thing I do is I click on here. I get zoomed into a menu, and you can see I've got different options here for different demos of learning. So the first one I'm going to do is this one. So immediately, this has now launched what we call a quest, and I'm going to show you behind the scenes of how this was built. But the first thing that's happened is we have an establishing shot. shot, same as you would have in the opening of a movie. Establishing shot here is a scene where we've got a couple of people looking at a large-scale version of a circuit board, transistors and resistors and so on and so forth. And there's a question. Obviously, I'm assuming in this demo that somebody is learning about electrical design, and he says this circuit needs a 340 kilohertz resistor with a tolerance of plus or minus 5%. Which of these three resistors should you use? So I've got three different resistors with images on them, different camera angles, again, telling the story, showing the information. You can check the color chart on the wall if you need to. I click continue. So that's three passive steps of information where I've been shown the circuit board, I've been shown my options, and I've been shown where my information is. I can hover over this board here and zoom in and trying to decipher this complicated information here, and then I can zoom out. And now what I can do is I can take a random guess because I have no idea, because I wasn't really paying enough attention, which is my approach, and that was incorrect. And now I'm going to have another random go, and I'm incorrect again. And now finally, I'm probably going to pick the right one this time. Yes, indeed I have, and I see it animating into place. I get another cutscene, and correct the orange, yellow, and black bands to note 340. You have completed circuit. Okay, super simple, but we saw going from passive to active. I'll show you the other one in here, the wayfinding one on the oil rig, very quickly. So this one is about wayfinding, learning your way around. Again, dialogue. I'm going to snap through that really quickly. Now you can see I'm starting off. I have to run around collecting these giant bubblegum things that explode in front of me, because that's what does happen on real oil rigs. And well done, I'm going to teleport you back. Now you do the training wheel off. So this time I do the same route, no visual guides. And we'll get to the last one because the last one's worth seeing. Come around. Great. On this final one, you need to avoid the fire. So you can see now there's a fire there. Oh, and you've got a timed run. So now it's only 90 seconds that I've got to do it. And if I come around here and run into the flames, that gets back. Ouch, try not to set yourself on fire. Okay, so that's just an example of some of the features. Let's just come in here, and I showed you some of these basic building blocks like seats and non-player characters. Here now, I'm going to show you one of those quests. So here I've got the quest designer. It's another component in the platform. And so here what we've got is a node-based or step-based or card-based system, where I've got card after card after card after card that build that story that you just saw. And this one, which is called the Wayfinding Quest, is the one, the second one you saw me do with the oil rig. So you can see it starts off with, this one is really number one, where I've actually just teleported the player. So I moved them from the classroom where they were downstairs up onto the oil, and that happened instantaneously. And then I have that, that cutscene that we saw where distilling information. So I have a number of actors. I can have as many as I want. In this one I have Claire, who was the non-player character, and this will put the player's name in, where if I do percentage, uppercase player percentage, then the player's name will show. So I've got a couple of actors in my dialogue, in my conversation. This type is called a conversation step. And now you can see I've got individual beats within that conversation. This wayfinding module has 3 rounds. Up to the first thing I was told. I've got a camera angle associated with it. I can play an animation. I can play an audio clip if I want. And those play through those scenes where I'm distilling information, just a camera shot. Most of these are just a camera shot and a sentence that the user reads. And then I have another active step, and this is an activity step. This one's called a counter step, and this is where I'm collecting 12 counters, and those were actually those bright pink sort of floating balls that guided me around where I needed to go. Then I get teleported back to the start point again, another conversation step telling this time I'm going to do it without a visual guide. So this just shows you again, I mean, building these is pretty straightforward. You just sort of add them up, and eventually, you add a new step on the end, and you choose what sort of step it's going to be. Is it a conversation step or whatever? So, I mean, the demo that you've seen with that classroom and those different learning modules and so on and so forth, I created all of that myself. There's no code involved. I haven't done any scripting. Basically, I've spent lots of time fiddling with complicated Lego bricks. So I'm going to wrap up on that note just to sort of highlight what I think are the key messages. Is enormous potential, but I'm very clear in my own mind that 95% of teachers aren't going to build lesson plans using these tools. And so where we need to get to is a community or a group or a set of organizations who do gain expertise in these tools, who could take guidance from teachers and who can then hand out sort of packs of free content that's easy to switch on in different subject areas.
What about, can I ask a question there?
Yes.
What about, so my thing always is like, what about students as content developers, and building a repository, that they either co-create with teachers or whatnot? To me, that would be really powerful.
Absolutely. It sounds as though, from your perspective, you have people within your school who probably already are getting their arms around Unity and have an understanding of how Unity works. And so something we would love to see, one of the things about a platform like this that is a full feature virtual world is that potentially what you could have is, a school team that picks up some of these tools, builds some, as you say, some courseware, some modules or whatever, and then actually can bring that into a virtual world where you can actually even share that with other schools and other school teams who are building other things. And so you can actually have different schools and different groups of pupils from all over the country meeting and sort of setting up their own projects and sharing learning and maybe having sort of intra-school competitions and things like that inside the virtual world. And as you say, ultimately building out content that's useful for everyone. So anything that sort of progressed that as an idea, I think would be really, really exciting.
Yeah. And would you say, what level of Unity experience would you say is necessary? Because we're like, the kids here, myself even, are not adept at Unity yet, but are interested. So some tools, like I don't know if this actually makes it easier because of your built-in tools, or do you need that real solid base of Unity first?
Well, I think so. We have about 20 hours of tutorial videos online, and that's probably the most accessible resource in terms of information as to how to get your arms around these tools. In terms of is it easier or harder than Unity in general, one of the critical ways that it's easier is that all of our tools work nicely together. So often what makes Unity difficult is that you'll go into the Unity asset store and there'll be a role-playing component you can grab, but it doesn't play nicely with some other component that you grabbed from the asset store. So it can be quite hard to bring different bits and pieces together into a coherent project, whereas here everything plays nicely with itself, with each other, and you've got effortless publishing tools.
Right.
The last thing I'll show you, which just indicates that, is once you've assembled a scene like this, one of the components you have is this, which is called the scene export settings component, which is basically just a form you fill in. You grab the URL here, and then you press submit, and the entire scene gets packaged up into a zip file sent to our servers, and then we do the whole iteration, updating if it's an update, publishing it for the first time. You get emails confirming when it's processed, it's hosted, you're there and you can walk in. So I would say, generally speaking, Unity is Unity. You wouldn't find it harder picking up tools. There are tools. There are some ways in which it makes life easier, certainly in terms of any kind of multi-user or hosted environment. Obviously, it's dramatically easier because you don't have to worry about any of those things. But you still got to be prepared to be patient enough to get grips with the way Unity is.
So what if in other words, if we went through your tutorials without having prior Unity experience, would that work, or would it be wise to wrap our head around Unity first before delving in?
I think up to a point it would. I think probably it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
I think if you've got no experience of Unity at all, then you would want to do some of their tutorials first,
Okay.
and then come on to ours. But I think once you have a basic understanding of Unity, you understand the UI, you understand what the hierarchy is and the project is and the inspector is. Once you know your way around the application, there's 2 tutorial videos that are our first ones. One of them just shows the process of importing our editor pack in. So you've got our tools, that's about a 7-minute tutorial. And then the next one takes you through the process step by step of uploading essentially a sandbox region. And once you've done that, which is about a 10-minute tutorial, then basically you're at races. And the next time you upload one, it can have a chair in it or whatever it is you really want to do. So I would say, get to grips with Unity itself at the most basic level. But once you've done anything with it, then you'd be good to go with us.
And what's the pricing like? Are the editing tools freely available, or is that a license thing?
Yes, editing tools are freely available, and you can actually start uploading content to our developer servers at no cost. I think Sean can probably provide you with pricing on the sort of education side, because I know we do heavily discount for educational institutions.
Yes, Steve, I can send that to you later. But
Okay.
you can do an awful lot without having to think first about spending money.
Right, and including building the environment and being in the environment. Both of those you can start with before we're worried about.
Correct.
Okay, good.
Correct. Yeah. Just for your reference, what we have is when you click this submit button and the content goes up to the server, the first place it arrives is basically a staging server. Now that has full functionality, the same as the live server. The only issue is that it's only registered developers who are allowed in there, and there's no economy. Now, registered developers and economy probably aren't terribly relevant to you. You could register all of your pupils as developers. If you just sat camping in our staging servers perennially, then we might come along and sort of poke you in the ribs and say, well, hang on, at some point you need to subscribe. But in terms of doing investigations and validating the process,
Got it. Neat. Cool. Well, my kids are the bell's gonna ring here. It'll be a nice, loud, obnoxious sound in a second, and then they're gonna have to all head out to lunch. But so let me sign out for now. If there's more to come and we need to do a follow-up or something, we could chat. But I think it was great for us to get a sense of what's possible.
Terrific. Well, look, I hope it was useful, and I'll ask Sean to follow up. And just as a last observation for you, of course, if you do take the step of wanting to pick up the tools and have a go doing something, we do have very active developer communities, including of educators. There's chat groups and so on and so forth that you can join. So there's loads of support in the community of people to talk to if you do want to get involved.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. And
That's our pleasure.
Nice to participate with you, Noah.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye for now.